just started filming and every single tractor in England is outside the window. A woman is at the funeral of her friend's husband, and she goes up to the widow and she says, "How did he die?" And the widow says, "It was the alcohol in the end that got him." And the woman asks, "Why didn't he go to Alcoholics Anonymous?" And the widow replies, "God, he wasn't that bad." Morbid but relevant. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Okay, buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride. 4.5 years ago, I was on my way to Heathrow Airport, where someone I cared deeply about had paid for a one-way ticket to New Zealand for me, to begin my life again after a long period of alcoholism. I'd already had a cycle of relapses and sobriety. I'd been hospitalized a few times, some experiences with delirium tremens. But this day, I had been sober for about 6 months, and I thought I was ready. I thought I was ready to rejoin the world, to restart my life in a new country, thanks to this opportunity I had been given, this new second chance. The flight was at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I'd left my house in a remote part of Cornwall at 6 a.m. and by 7 a.m. I had bought a bottle of vodka. And by noon I was in jail after headbutting a policeman. I had woken up that morning sober and excited for the future. And before I knew it, only a few hours later, I was in jail for assaulting a cop. And I was being carried out in leg irons, not just handcuffs, from Piccadilly Train Station, with thousands of commuters watching. They'd stopped the trains in Piccadilly Train Station to deal with me. They had cleared the platforms. I got a 2-year suspended sentence for that. If it hadn't have been for COVID and for some humility in front of a judge, I would have gone to prison for that. I never made it to New Zealand, and I never saw the person who arranged that trip for me ever again. I had to close that chapter of my life before it had even begun. Another bridge burned due to my drinking. So why am I telling you this today? Well, yesterday I was watching a UK-based sober influencer on Instagram. It's Millie Gooch of Sober Girl Society, a fantastic community specifically for sober women. I highly recommend it. And she was talking about a thing called the not that bad trap. And she was saying that the algorithm of social media like Instagram and YouTube is designed in such a way to surface up the most extreme and the most dramatic stories of alcoholism and recovery. And since I consider my own experiences to be relatively extreme and dramatic, I think that I'm probably in that group of content creators that she was talking about. The case that she was making was that for people who are only slightly concerned about their drinking, the algorithm may surface very extreme and dramatic content, like mine, I suppose. And those people might look at us and think, well, at least I'm not that bad. There might be some reassurance that, at least my alcoholism isn't as bad as Bat Country's, for example. And that attitude might actually prevent them from seeking the help they might need to get better, to beat the habit forever. It might make you, watching this, feel like you don't need help yet. because your own experience is not as extreme or as dramatic as the stories that you're encountering on social media. It might make you complacent, or it might make you fail to recognize the risks in your own behavior. And just to be clear, Millie wasn't condemning this kind of content. She was saying that extreme stories can serve as cautionary tales. They are important and they should be heard and expressed. They can illustrate what might happen if you don't stop. And her real point was to emphasize the fact that you shouldn't wait until it's incredibly bad, until it's really dramatic, before you seek help. And my God, I absolutely agree with that. You don't have to wait until you're being carried out of Piccadilly Train Station by 7 burly London cops before you recognise that you have a problem. Any time that you want to get sober is the right time to get sober. There is no correct way to be sober. But I couldn't stop myself from reflecting on that idea and the impact that my stuff, the stuff that I'm talking about, might have to a kind of casual viewer, to the kind of person who isn't yet sure if they have a problem. I've been telling myself since I started talking so honestly about my experiences, I've just kind of assumed that I'm doing a good thing, and that there is more reward than risk, and that I am doing more good than harm by sharing these kinds of very extreme experiences with alcoholism. But her point made me question that. Do rock bottom, delirium tremens horror stories like mine have a kind of chilling effect on people who might be in the "at least I'm not that bad" trap? Am I preventing people from getting help? Now listen, I'm not looking for reassurance here, I promise you. I much prefer a bracing truth to a comforting lie. So I'm not looking to be comforted or consoled. But I can't deny the idea that I might be preventing less severe alcoholics from seeking help by serving as a kind of bad example for them, by serving as a kind of excuse for them not to get sober. Well, that idea is sobering for me, ironically. And it's been on my mind like an earworm ever since I heard her talk about it. And I want to explore it today. I want to pursue that line of reasoning to see where it takes us. So, when you assault a police officer, you don't get treated the same as everybody else. They don't like you after that. And I learned that in Kazakhstan. I mean, I knew it already, but I had it tested in Kazakhstan, where I punched a policeman and then the rest of them kicked my teeth out, broke my jaw, put me in that horrible jail cell to go through the most painful alcohol withdrawal of my entire life. So I got it firsthand. And while I'm talking about that, perhaps this is not the most appropriate time to point out that the book in which I recount that story of my descent into alcoholism is back in stock, just crazy enough to work once again. And by popular demand, a lot of you have asked if there is an audiobook version of it read by me. And there is, and that is on my website also. So if you enjoy my kind of laid back, easy listening, coffee shop vibe of sober content, you will find much more on the audiobook to a much more professional quality. There is a link in the description. You can go take a look. There's a sample on the product page. You can listen to a section of one of the chapters. But anyway, in the UK, the treatment by the police was not that bad. It was not like Kazakhstan bad. But it was very obvious that they didn't like me. I'd headbutted a cop. Of course they didn't like me. They weren't all queuing up outside to kick lumps of me like they were in Kazakhstan. But it was made obvious to me that I was not welcome. When you're arrested, often you'll get, like, just as a courtesy, you'll have cups of coffee and people will check on you, offer you food, that kind of thing. And I had none of that. And if you've committed some other crime, quite often a police officer will wander into your cell and strike up a conversation as if a friend, but will secretly be trying to get you to reveal incriminating information to use in the interview. None of that happened. They just didn't care about me at all. And that is somehow scarier. And they can keep you in the cell for 24 hours before they release you. And they kept me, I think, for 23 hours and 59 minutes. They wanted me to think I wasn't going home that day. And I sat in that cell alone with that terrible hangover, that terrible first relapse hangover, thinking about how I was definitely guilty of what they were accusing me of, and that there was a person halfway around the world who was waiting at an airport, wondering why I hadn't got off the plane. And it puts a sickness in my stomach every time I think about that. I sat there and I thought about how I had just burned my final bridge, thrown away my last second chance for the sake of a bottle of vodka. And because I had blown everything up so badly this time that there was no coming back from this, and I may as well accept that and just drink myself to death. And that's what I tried to do for a while. And today, of all the things I'm grateful for, and of all the things I have failed at, I am most grateful that I failed at that particular endeavor. Time is a great healer. Pain fades, and that's great. But sometimes it is useful to remember that the pain hurt. We need to be reminded sometimes of what that pain felt like. Because those who don't learn from the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. And that's how we stay sober. So it's like this. Doing this kind of work, backcountry, recovery, it brings me into contact with a lot of other people in various stages of their own active use and addiction and recovery. Addicts of all stripes. Not just alcohol, but chemicals and behaviors and compulsions, you name it. Eating disorders. There's a lot of overlap there between all sorts of various disorders and addictions. There is a lot of kind of overlap which is more than superficial. Some of you watching this might already be in that at least I'm not that bad trap now. And some of you might be in the early stages of trying to figure out whether you have a problem. And others may have identified a problem and you're figuring out how to address it. Some of you might be here to understand somebody else's problem. And some of you may have been successfully controlling a problem for 20 years or more. And apart from the people who are here for information about other people, there is a commonality to all of our behavior. Whatever stage of use, addiction and recovery you are at, the framework that underlies it is identical for all of us. This condition is the same for all of us, but it just manifests differently. It's the same disease with infinite variations. In very, very broad sweeps, conditions like kleptomania and gambling addiction are very similar. So is opioid addiction and alcohol addiction. Alcohol addiction and, I don't know, pica, the compulsion to eat things that isn't food. There's overlap there too. And while I recognize the argument that alcoholism is a spectrum, I think it is simultaneously true that it's not possible to be a little bit addicted to something or a little bit compulsive. You either are or you're not. Now, I risk straying into semantics here and getting bogged down with definitions and stuff. So I reserve the right to change my mind about this stuff at some point in the future should a very persuasive argument be presented. But right now, as of this moment, I am more and more convinced that addiction is not a spectrum. Only the consequences of it are. And in that sense, if you're a person who's comparing 3 glasses of wine every evening, which is your consumption, to my, half gallon of vodka every day for months on end, then I think I'm afraid to say that our condition actually is the same. Our drinking is the same. It's just the consequences of it that are different. I think that if you're concerned about your level of drinking, then it is likely you and I have exactly the same problem. Your drinking is as bad as mine. You just haven't been dragged out of Piccadilly Train Station yet. I feel like I need to elaborate on that. So in a previous video, I covered the subject of whether an alcoholic needs to hit rock bottom before they get sober. And the conclusion I came to in that video was that some do and some do not. But I missed something crucial. And a lot of you pointed it out to me in the comments, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for a second opportunity to talk about it. Because the thing that I missed was that rock bottoms are unique to the person experiencing them. Everybody's rock bottom is subject to their interpretation of it. A person defines their own rock bottom, their own lowest point in their addiction. That is up to that person. And it is entirely idiosyncratic. Our rock bottoms might look entirely different. Mine might be, going through alcohol withdrawal in a prison cell in Kazakhstan, for example. Yours might be losing a good job, or missing an important event, or letting a friend down. It doesn't always have to be dramatic and extreme for it to be a rock bottom if that's how you interpret it. No one is here to judge what is and isn't, certainly not me. A component of that is that alcoholics like comparing misery. We're in competition to see who has the most bummer story. And there's no shame in seeking those stories out or even enjoying them in some perverse sense. I know that I personally seek out the most extreme that I possibly can. I feel like a shared connection with that person. But the risk is that if the algorithm is surfacing these very extreme and dramatic alcoholism stories for you, and the consequences for you so far haven't been very bad compared to the stories that you're taking in, it's going to be tempting for you to think that therefore your drinking isn't so bad either. And there's a flip side to that. So if you are the kind of person who believes you might be stuck in that "at least I'm not that bad" trap, and what you take from a video like this one is, well, at least I haven't been dragged in cuffs from Piccadilly Train Station, so my drinking can't be as bad as bad countries, then I think, unfortunately, your problem might be more dangerous than mine. You see, my problem was very obviously dangerous. It wasn't subtle. It was dramatic, and it was extreme. And its obviousness made it an easy target to tackle. It was very well defined. There was no ambiguity about my drinking problem. And my problem was obvious enough that it had to be dealt with. So I did. Eventually. It took a while. In alcoholism, or at least in recovery, worse is actually better. The worse the problem, the clearer you can see it. The worse the problem, the worse the consequences, the easier it is to tackle it, to point at it and say that's what needs to be addressed. And it's very easy to recognize that you have a problem when you're sat in a prison cell after headbutting a policeman. It's not always so easy if the place you're sat is your sofa and you're watching Family Fortunes with a Bud Light. That's a difficult problem because it's very subtle. That's in a lot of ways more dangerous because it might mean you never recognize that you have a problem. You might not drink as much as I did, and you might not have experienced the same severity of the consequences. But we are the same. We've got the same problem. Because underneath, once you've crossed whatever the threshold is between moderation and addiction for you, there is no returning to it. Once you've crossed that threshold, our drinking is the same. The only difference is scale. And ultimately, we are as bad as each other. And don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. There's solidarity in that. If you're, for example, 21 years old and you're worrying the booze is getting on top of you, and you're checking in here to see if your suspicion is accurate, then I can tell you it is accurate. And once you've had that suspicion, it doesn't ever go back. It might take 20 years to get to the point where you need to stop drinking rather than want to stop drinking. But the moment you start to suspect you might be drinking too much, well, the prognosis is never good after that. So, back to Millie's point on Sober Girl Society. She said that although your problem is not as bad as mine, that is no reason for you not to get sober. And I profoundly agree, with a caveat. That thinking is not a reason to not get sober. However, your problem is the same as mine. And your drinking is every bit as bad as mine. Because it's all the same disease underneath. Okay. Unexpectedly heavy, considering I was underprepared. If you've watched this far and you kind of dig this lo-fi approach to sober content, then do go and listen to the sample chapter of the audiobook on my website. Link is in the description. Like, share, subscribe, and please leave your thoughts and comments in the reply section below. I read everything. Thanks for watching. And as always, good luck out there.